Good afternoon. It's Sunday the 1st of June 2014. It's a very nice British spring day, and this is another video where I'd like to put over some of my ideas about the martial arts to my Kajuen students and to the martial arts world at large. What I want to talk about today is the use of foreign language in martial arts. Now, the perspective I'm coming from is, because I teach Jujitsu, is the use of Japanese in an English dojo. The reason I want to film this video is because I've been accused lots about using too much Japanese, and I dispute that. So I want to answer that accusation, but also make it a more useful video for people generally. Now, I'm not just talking about Japanese. You know, if you do wushu, then you might train in Cantonese or Mandarin. If you do Taekwondo, you might be used to Korean. If you study the Filipino martial arts, you've got the Filipino dialects such as Tagalog. And I've trained in all of these systems, so I'm used to having to apply different languages to my training. So, as I say, I'm talking about Japanese here. Now, first and foremost, what has to be iterated, this represents my opinion. I am but one person. You may completely agree with my opinion, and that's great. If you don't agree with my opinion, that's absolutely fine. That's the way it should be. Okay, to quote George S. Patton, if everybody thinks alike, then somebody isn't thinking. So some of you will disagree with what I've got to say. Great, it's not a problem at all, really, okay? So, to anybody that thinks that I use excess Japanese, firstly, my advice to you is go and take up serious judo or Aikido or karate and see how much Japanese get used in those classes. In judo, all the throws, all the joint locks, all the pins are done in Japanese, and they've got, you know, considering variations as well, hundreds of throws at their disposal. If you do Aikido, all of your attacks and defences and techniques are in Japanese. I would call this a wrist grab. In Aikido, I would be used to it being called kotidori. And then you've got your eye hamli, for example, you know, for your different stances. Tachiwaza, hanbi, handachi, they're all different ways of standing in regards to your training partner. In karate, when I did karate seriously down in Cardiff, everything we did after a certain level was in Japanese. All our punches, all our kicks, all our blocks were in Japanese. So I don't think I use that much really. Our classes are conducted in English, but I do bring in Japanese terminology. Of course, martial arts classes, they have to be accessible. You have to be able to use language that is appropriate to your students, be they adults, be they juniors, or whatever. And indeed, you know, we're a multicultural society. You've got to think some of your students might not even have English as their first language. You've got to consider this, and I certainly do. I don't believe I teach in Japanese excessively. I'm an educated man. I've got a degree. I do approach things with a very much a scientific perspective. I think things through. I seek greater depth and of understanding of things. And that's me, that's my approach. I'm not going to apologise for that. A lot of people get a lot of benefit out of how I teach. If that doesn't suit somebody else, again, that's fine. There are other sensei with different approaches, and some sensei are absolutely brilliant at simplifying things. You know, each to their own. We all will go to what suits us. Now, I know some people will say, we don't do any Japanese in our dojo. We don't do any at all. At which point I say, fair enough, sensei. Kancho, Shihan, Dogi, Obi, Hakama, Tatami, Dojo, Shodan, Nidan, Sandan, Shodan, Ho-Kyu, Katana, Nunchaku, Bojo, Tonfa, Sai, Ukimi, Rei, Yame, Hajime. No, you don't do any Japanese at all, do you? Okay? So be honest about what it is that you're doing. Hell, you know, if you're teaching karate, that's a Japanese term. If you're teaching jiu-jitsu, it's a Japanese term. So why do I use Japanese in my classes? Why do I? Going back to the first video I did on introducing the Kajuen Ryu, I brought to you the concept of there being three domains to martial arts. Art, self-protection and sport. And to a large degree, the language part fits into the art because we're acknowledging the culture that we've come from, and that is of great interest to some people. Why wear a hakama? Why wear a dogi? Why do we rei? Why do we bow at the start? It's all giving respective nods to where our martial arts have come from. I personally love that. I believe that using certain terms promotes understanding. I don't think it gets in the way of understanding, I think it promotes understanding. And the best example I can give of this is Jujitsu. So what does Jujitsu mean? Well, some people would say it's the art of gentleness, and to that I say, utter rubbish. It never has been, that's just a completely mistranslation. It doesn't mean that's all, it never has. Nobody that knows anything about Jiu-Jitsu believes that to be the case. It does not mean gentle. There's nothing gentle about Jiu-Jitsu. Just look at the techniques. The thing with Japanese language, very often you can't make direct translations. Japanese words give you concepts, and that's the case with Ju. Ju is not a word that can be directly translated. Ju is a concept. So what does Ju mean? Well, Ju means to go with energy, to not use force. Yielding. I think it's Eddie Ferry who, in his book, he describes Jiu-Jitsu as the art of giving way or giving in without giving up. And I like that. It's too wordy, but I like it. The term I tend to use to make it accessible is the art of pliancy. That's what seems to work for us. And I think once you understand that, it means that a lot of your techniques, a lot of your principles make much more sense. That's one of the reasons that we throw, because you're moving with energy as opposed to directly against it. Once you start to apply karate style blocks or taekwondo style blocks, you're meeting force with force. Nothing wrong with those methods necessarily, but those to me do not make good jiu-jitsu. So there's the understanding aspect to it. Uki, what does uki mean? Agi-uki, rising block, so uki means block, right? Uki is also the person having the technique done to them. Uki means to receive. So when you are defending, when you are meeting an attack, you are receiving that attack. That's uki, agi-uki, for example, if that's what you believe that agi-uki actually is, which is a story for another day. The person on whom the technique is being performed is the receiver. They are uki. You also get uki-mi, break falls, rolls. So you are receiving the attack and you're break falling, uki-mi. So again, it adds a layer of understanding. Shuto. Shuto, knife hand. Shuto-uki. Shuto-uchi. Knife hand. Now firstly, I detest the term chop, as in karate chop. A chop is what you have with your Sunday lunch. A chop, it means to hack at, which, you know, we know our strikes should be aimed through the target. Shuto, blade hand or knife hand. And when you look at it that way, it makes so much more sense. My low grades will learn to defend against Shuto attacks. You would think, well, why? Because, you know, it never happens, does it? You know, you never get a Shuto attack in reality. When yet I'm doing it as part of pragmatic self-protection. Why? Because that Shuto represents a knife, represents a knife attack. And because we're calling it a knife hand or a Shuto, in my opinion, that just makes it make so much more sense. And this is one of the underlying principles of the Kajuen route, universality. So my white belts are learning knife defence because they're learning to defend against a knife hand, but we're not giving them weapons just yet. So we're giving them an accessible, pragmatic martial art from day one. And when you put the language into it, again, this is just all part of it making sense. And there are many other examples of that. The last reason I would give that's positive for the use of Japanese would be cross-culture training. I have trained and I've taught in other countries, and I've trained with people from other countries. And what's very interesting in the martial arts is the universal language usually comes back to Japanese. And I would cite this in the Kempo International World Championships of 2007, which was hosted in Bedford. And I was part of the administration team for that. And we had teams competing from England, Scotland, Wales, Portugal, France, Bulgaria, Sweden. And you would think the common language would be English, and certainly in my experience of travelling, English is, a widely known language. In my experience, most French or German people speak better English than most English people. But on this particular event, even the French team's English wasn't very good. The Bulgarians' English was non-existent. So what was the common language? It was Japanese, because we all studied a Japanese martial art. So we all understood the scoring system, we all understood what we were being directed to do, and it worked. And that's very much my experience from other events. So the whole point of this video is I'm hoping that this opinion, agree or disagree, gives you a perspective that's of use to somebody, that you think about this. And it might hopefully give you a bit of an aid to your martial arts, or maybe just make you think about why you do things, or why you do or don't use certain language in the class. But that's my perspective on the use of Japanese in an English dojo. So thanks for watching, hope it's been of use. Hope to catch some of you on the mat sometime. If ever I can be of assistance to anybody in martial arts, please do give me a shout. Always see what I can do to help people out. Good night, thanks for watching.